Welcome to Masterclass Cinema, the series where I discuss one aspect of a movie that I love and still feel inspired by for its technical achievements. Today I'll be discussing Terminator 2 Judgment Day, a film still hailed in this day and age for being the greatest blockbuster of all time. An example as to why could easily be given to the amazing visual effects of the T-1000 character. However, today I'll be focusing on every visual effect and special effects technique around the T-1000. Although credit to young Sherlock Holmes and even James Cameron's The Abyss, it wasn't until Terminator 2 that changed filmmaking forever. Just when you thought you could no longer show the impossible, we now have CGI to reopen that possibility. But for the most part, the CGI of Terminator 2 was also a giant, risky experiment. And the reason this movie is still the classic it is today is because if the CGI didn't look good, you still have a massive blockbuster that utilizes as many effects techniques as possible by the most talented people in the business. Terminator 2 wouldn't fail if the CGI failed. So, this video will focus on how Terminator 2 used every effects trick in the book and why it still deserves the title of the greatest blockbuster of all time. I would also like to introduce my special guest joining me in this video.
Hey there, I'm Xavier Mendoza, and you may know me from such memorable YouTube flops as Spider-Man Games Retrospective Part 3, Spectacular Spider-Man Intro Boondock Style, and The Real Problem with Chuck E. Cheese. Much like CorderyFX, I also like The Terminator and its two classic films that had no sequels. It's going to be a lot of fun examining what makes the visuals of this movie so damn memorable, and I'm honored to be a co-host today. With that, I'll give it back to you, Danny boy. Am I allowed to use your real name?
So the first effect of note is probably the most simple. The scenes where the T-800 and T-1000 arrive in present day. The time bubble expands and then deflates and leaves behind the burn marks in the truck and the metal fence under the bridge. The way this effect was accomplished was by applying reflective material onto the burn marks of the truck and fence. This is the same method used in the 1978 Superman movie. On set, the suits would look like a dull grey, but they were actually highly reflective when a certain light was pointed at them. So rather than sorting out some complicated burning rig or cell animate glowing hot metal, they just simply applied this reflective material and bam, glowing burning metal. And despite this being such a simple setup, it even adds to the effect when the camera dollies around Arnold and the material stops being reflective, which actually makes the burning metal look like it's cooling down. The T-1000 scene is so simple. Just cut a hole in the fence, put the reflective material on the inner edges of the hole. Now you know exactly where the time bubble arrived.
Cell animation was a technique constantly used in movies long until the 80s and died out during the 90s. There are some films you watch now where it's glaringly obvious, like the sex scene from The Howling, or that one shot from the start of the 1989 Batman movie. You see a little cell animated Batman standing on a roof and he walks away. Those are examples where green screens or animatronics would have served better. However, there's some movies where cell animation is used that you would never know is in there. In Jaws, when they attach the tracker to the shark, you can see animated glowing in the water. You can even see some of that in The Predator when he's crushed by a log. And speaking of The Predator, cell animation was pretty much the only way you could simulate electricity. Just like the first The Terminator, the movie, the film, when some buff naked men teleport in from the future to ruin Sarah Connor's weekend for the fourth time, there's arcs of delicious lightning everywhere. That's an appropriate use of cell animation. Now on to the laser gun trails for the opening Future War scene. The Future War scene will be brought up a lot in this video, mainly because it's so detailed with so many different types of visual effects, special effects, and a neato smoke and mirrors approach that puts modern blockbuster action movies to shame. The only point of reference at the time would be the blaster shots in Star Wars, but they actually wanted to add a bit more depth to the laser beams in Terminator. So there is a core light and a colored glow that fades out of it. This carries over into Terminator 2, but looks so much better this time around. There's an awesome shot where you can see the tracers from the beam shooting off into the distance. There are actually animated muzzle flash highlights added on top of the Terminator models, and this particular shot brings us to the next topic.
So, one of the greatest and oldest techniques in filmmaking I can happily say made its way into this movie. So how do you make a 40-foot gorilla? How do you make skeletons come back to life? How do you make giant walking robot camels? How do you make a chicken walking gun turret shoot up a board meeting? And of course, how do you have a robot walk out of flames? Stop motion animation. The process of taking a photo, moving your animation model slightly, taking another photo, moving the model again, repeating this tedious process, then running the film back at the standard film frame rate gives off the illusion of real motion, but also brings something to life that you couldn't get away with using a person in a suit or a giant prop. This of course was heavily used in the showdown of the original Terminator movie. Although dated looking now, back then it was so effective for wide shots of the T-800 walking around the factory. The fact that it's a robot, but it's also been damaged, hence the limping, the jerkiness of the stop motion still adds to the effect, rather than being distracting. So for the opening Future War scene in Terminator 2, we now need to show that there's many T-800s on the battlefield. This shot is so quick, but it's such a great multi-layered shot that is all in camera. The two T-800s in the foreground are animatronic puppets, and the two T-800s in the background are stop motion animation, which have been pre-filmed and then played back on a rear projection screen with the animatronic puppets in front of them.
Another one of the old special effects film techniques is building miniatures for sets, buildings, or entire locations, whether for budgetary constraints or to show something impossible to build to full scale, or most of the time to blow up something that would cost a fortune to rebuild again and again full size. James Cameron is no stranger to using miniatures, going back to the very original Terminator, and this would go on to be one of his favorite techniques all the way up until Titanic. As much as Terminator 2 utilizes so many effect styles, the Future War scene probably features the most. Just from the opening shot of the skeletons in the car, followed by the crane shot up to the nuclear wasteland of Los Angeles. This setup perfects the forced perspective intro shot to the first Terminator. You have a full-scale skull in front of the camera, then the skulls get progressively smaller as they plunge back into the distance. And the backdrop is a small-scale set of ruins with a miniature hunter-killer model in the background. The opening shot to T2 features the exact same method, just on a bigger budget and scale. However, the most detailed miniature scene in the film is Sarah Connor's nightmare of the nuclear holocaust. It would be so easy to say with a modern perspective that this whole scene now looks dated, especially when you watch it on the Blu-ray, which is true in a way, but a perfect justification for that is it's Sarah's nightmare. She describes when the nuclear bomb hits, people fly apart like leaves, and just to show how doomed the world is by nuclear destruction, everything just disintegrates like it's nothing. But in the pre-CGI does everything world, building all of these structures was nothing short of impressive. If the shot doesn't look good, you have to rebuild all of this. In fact, the only CGI shot of the destruction is this one. Just like the truck explosion from the first Terminator movie, this film also does something similar. Where that was a miniature to show the truck exploding, this film has the liquid nitrogen truck flipping on its side and cracking open. That is a fact that CorderyFX only learned recently and had a hard time picking out all of the shots that are miniature.
Yeah, just like the end fight between the Power Loader and Queen Alien and Aliens, the miniature models and sets match the full-scale footage so well, it's a tricky one to guess all the shots.
This is my segment. Stay in your lane or else your truck explosion won't be in 1/10 scale, sir. So, shots when the tanker truck rolls over and then cracks in half are miniature. But from what we can tell, this shot, and this shot might also be miniature. Movie magic! It's also good to still see miniatures used in big Hollywood action movies today. It's a special effects art form that will take a while to become a dying one. They even use some of it in The Dark Knight. There's something about a miniature Batmobile slamming into a miniature garbage truck that looks way more believable than, say, this? Hey, the other guy wrote most of my dialogue. Take it up with him.
So if you're making a special effects, visual effects, creature heavy film from the 70s to the 90s, chances are if you have Stan Winston's company involved, your movie is going to be an instant classic. Creature makeup and puppets are an important staple in the fantasy, sci-fi and horror genres. Whether you are making a monster, alien or robot, this man and his company have brought some of the most insane ideas to life. There were still plenty of creature effects houses throughout the 80s and 90s that did great work. The only reason I bring up Stan Winston is for the sole reason that not only did he work on the original Terminator, also they won the Best Visual Effects and Makeup Oscar for this film.
The Oscar goes to Dennis Murin, Stan Winston, Gene Warren Jr., and Robert Skotak. Terminator 2 Judgment Day. The award for Best Achievement in Makeup goes to Stan Winston and Jeff Dahn for Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
On the original Terminator, we had various glimpses of the robot underneath the flesh. Servos in the forearm, an exposed red robot eye, then a partially ripped off face showing depth and exposed hydraulics. All of this pales in comparison when the endoskeleton emerges out of the fire at the end. to which James Cameron was originally going to stick to mostly stop motion before Stan Winston convinced him to build the full-scale animatronic, stamping this 100% realistic and believable robot design in film history forever. The quality of the puppets and animatronics from Terminator 1 were cranked up to 11 on Terminator 2. Straight off the bat, we are not waiting a whole movie to see the endoskeleton, it's going to be the first thing you see. But obviously the T-800 endoskeleton was done perfectly in the first movie, so this one can only just be better. But one of the best aspects about this movie, outside of the T-1000 practical effects of course, are all of the other animatronics and puppets used throughout this film. One of which is one of the most haunting images in a mainstream movie. Sarah Connor on fire during the nightmare scene. Not only is it horrific her just being on fire and screaming, it then explodes to reveal the full skeleton underneath. Another one of note is the T-800 walking down the hallway being shot by the SWAT team. When just regular squibs would have sufficed, James Cameron wanted to go that extra mile by showing the Terminator's face being shot by bullets, revealing metal underneath. So a full-scale replica of Arnold's torso was made, with explosives going off in the face. Because, you know, you can't really put squibs on an actor's face and make them look invisible. This would be such an easy effect today in After Effects. But back then, just for this little scene of him walking down a hallway being shot, they build a full-sized prop. Next is one of the most brilliant ways to prove to someone that they are responsible for creating a supercomputer that manufactures robots and annihilates most of the planet. Just rip your arm skin off and show them your robot hand underneath. Everything about this animatronic hand is flawless, and it is on screen for the shortest time.
Now listen to me very carefully.
There are many great animatronics and puppets in this movie, but one that stands alone is the scene where they take the chip out of the T-800's head. Not even the most complicated or advanced of movie props, but it is such an advanced set piece that it was ultimately cut from the theatrical version for reasons I cannot fathom. This scene sets out to show you within one shot the T-800 in the mirror talking to Sarah and John through how to remove the chip cover from his head, then to dolly around to the top of his head to show the depth into his skull, all in one take. And the way they pull this off is once again movie magic. And also one sentence: there is no mirror. There are two duplicate sets with a hole in the wall. In one set we have Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton's twin sister, and a stand-in for Edward Furlong. Standing directly in front of camera is Linda Hamilton and Eddie Furlong and the puppet head of Arnold. So real Arnold is meant to be his own reflection, and Linda Hamilton and Eddie Furlong had to be in sync with their doubles. This is what James Cameron is fine with being a deleted scene. Wow.
There are a few instances of actually manipulating the real locations in this film. Nothing to write home about, you know, rigging up a fake bridge to drive the truck through, they added a fake divider in the drains to make the truck crash, you know, adding a hole in the ground where Sarah Connor's weapons are stored. Cyberdyne was a real building that they rigged up the front to explode. You know, not really that impressive. All that being said, the entire steel mill set is nothing short of special effects, artistry, and wizardry. The factory itself was a real steel mill that shut down 10 years prior and was about to be sold to China. So being a non-functional steel mill, it was up to the art department and special effects teams to basically make it look not only functional, but dangerous as fuck.
It's too hot. Go back.
To pull off this illusion, all the molten metal pools were filled with water and a mixture of oil and powdered sugar. So it had a globby top layer to stop it from actually looking like water. The big molten metal pour dishes were all fixed with orange lights built in under the water mixtures to give off the impression of super glowing hot molten steel, and to give off the effect of constant danger. There were effects people with hidden arc welders around every corner to just have sparks spraying everywhere. And to top off this entire effect, they pumped the whole building full of smoke and set up flickering orange and blue lights. Very simple and practical effects, but it's amazing when you just stop to think how the entire factory was filled with these effects for the entirety of the climax of the film. All of this is taken for granted in this era when the actors are just put on a green screen and looking at nothing. Now they can make it look as dangerous as possible. For that scene, you could put the factory scene from Attack of the Clones, where Natalie Portman is running through a big crazy conveyor belt, and it's like got like just a billion things moving everywhere. And the biggest irony out of all of this is that the set was actually cold, and they would have to constantly spray water on the actors to make it look like they were building up a sweat from the heat. The phrase movie magic has never been more applicable.
Now, onto the absolute unsung hero of Terminator 2. One of the oldest tricks in the book, setting up a screen behind your subjects and projecting a pre-recorded image for the background. Probably the most popular use is for people in a car and just showing the background moving behind them. A technique used a lot by James Cameron in his early films, and out of all the effects that he would always use, this is the one I associate with him the most. Always used for darkly lit scenes. Whatever was pre-filmed is projected onto a screen, and then they match the lighting on the actors and the foreground set dressing. This is used a lot in the future war scene in the original Terminator, just to show off the scale of the hunter killers. Looking at copies of Terminator 1 on Blu-ray now, it's more easy to tell when it is rear screen projection, and to an extent Aliens when the dropship crashes, and at the end when the Hadley's Hope is blowing up. But when it's not the main focus, it looks flawless. But something that's amazing about Terminator 2 is how much it is used to beef up the action scenes, and you just never know it's there. Using rear screen projection just to put you into the action with the main actors as much as possible. As mentioned before, its use in the future war scene is very standard, but when it's used throughout most of the movie is where it becomes such a useful technique. One shot in the drain chase. The T-800 lifts John onto his bike. Already we have amazing choreography with the vehicles chasing each other. The shot is so simple and fast. I'm mostly giving this one points for being a shot set during the daytime and still being flawless until, Blu-rays ruin everything. Next is the escape from Pescadero when the T-1000 is attacking them on the back of the cop car. Almost all of these shots are rear screen projection. Obviously the interior shots of them in the car, but also the wide shots outside of the car where the T-1000 is smashing in the window. All of the lighting matches so well. The sequence where rear screen projection is utilized the most in the movie is everything from getting into the pickup truck up until crashing into the steel mill. As I said before, standard for when our lead actors are inside the car and having the truck crash into them. Once they burst through the fence, basically every shot of the main actor is all rear screen projection. All of the shots of the T-800 leaning out of the truck shooting, these shots of Sarah and John driving through the factory, the tanker truck crashing into the steel mill entrance. This may seem like the weirdest example for me to lead up to. It's just putting actors in front of a projection screen, big deal. But it's incredible the more you think about planning all this. You film all these elaborate stunts on set with stunt doubles, massive vehicles, explosions, and then you go back to a soundstage months later, recreate the lighting and atmosphere. The actors are put into identical makeup, and you have to match the foreground elements to what you have filmed on set.
Terminator 2 was groundbreaking for a number of reasons, and the risks they took to bring its visual style to life stand the test of time, even when VFX have advanced far beyond what they were doing at the time. It's a historic film, which is ironic considering the time travel shenanigans that make this series what it is. Future filmmakers could all stand to learn something from its achievements, from a technical and storytelling standpoint, because even without all the bells and whistles, it's still a fantastic movie with a lot of heart.
It was very difficult trying not to discuss the effects of the T-1000. However, if you'd like to see a follow-up video purely discussing that amazing character, then let me know in the comments. Terminator 2 is such an amazing technical achievement in filmmaking. Just to prove that computer-generated images could work, James Cameron makes the best possible practical film he could, just in case he was wrong. And wrong he was not. Following in his footsteps was the also brilliant Jurassic Park. Another film that if the CGI dinosaurs didn't work, you still have state-of-the-art practical dinosaurs to win you over. Terminator 2 deserves all of the praise it still gets today. Despite it being the revolution of CGI, I think people still hold it in such high regard for the sheer fact that through its use of practical stunts, sets, props, and practical effects, it's still a movie that feels real because everything in it is real. And that is why Terminator 2 is a masterclass of cinema.
Get down. Hasta la vista, baby.
Oh, I have a cat. Oh my god, oh no, it's everywhere. Oh, there's a cat. Oh no, my heater came on. Oh no, I can't record now. There's just gonna be a weird... No. Oh shit, I bumped something with my elbow.